Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm hosting in lieu of Greg Blake today. He's not able to make it with us, but I do have my good buddy, my co-host, Nick Olson. So, how are you doing, Nick?
What's up, Matt? Good to see you. How you been?
Yeah, doing well. Clearly not as hectic of a week as Greg, so that's good. Uh, keeping it pretty low key this week. Glad Thanksgiving's coming up next week. Got less work down on the horizon. I feel like for the holiday season, so I'm excited for that.
Less work, more football.
Yeah,
Perfect
more
timing.
football. Hopefully, we get a lot of Vikings football left rather than just the 7 weeks or something we've got officially. So I guess we can hop right into it here, right? We got our nice big win, first one in a little while, especially 3 weeks now coming off the bye, and then the two straight losses off the bye against the Chargers, who are a pretty good team. So it feels nice coming back. Uh, Really, I think the number one thing for me in this game that I took away is we're actually allowed to score when we have a lead. Like I thought there was an NFL rule against that, but it turns out there's not. So we extended our lead, to what was it, 10 points or something there, and we're able to fend them off at the end, going for it on fourth down. I think that was kind of one of the keys to the game, right? Is how aggressive we were. Yeah, just from a game planning perspective, from a play calling perspective, from an in-game decision making perspective. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that.
Yeah, I thought there were two really telling quotes from Coach Zimmer after the game. The first was talking about when they were on that last drive that Zimmer told Clint Kubiak that, hey, let's try and put some points on the board here. We're not going to try and just settle and grind out the clock. Let's actually try and put this game away. And I think everybody in the front office knows, they can't keep leaving the games up to chance, because if they keep trying to have it just come down to who has the ball last in these one-score games, the luck hasn't been with them this year. So,
Right.
interestingly, this one does actually go down as another one-score game, but functionally, it's not. Like, they could have kicked a field goal
Yeah.
instead of kneeling down, and it would have been. They were in field goal range when they got that last fourth down
It,
conversion.
it feels
So
a
that
lot
was
better
the
when you have the 4 minute drive and you run out the clock, right? You have that long drive at the end of the game to run out the clock. It definitely doesn't feel like a one score game.
Yeah, yeah, and then the other quote, which kind of ties into the same that last drive, was Zim said on these, when it's 2nd and 20, we can't be settling for 5 yards to the flat or whatever. It's like so Zim expressing, I think, a lot of the same frustrations fans have. So that final drive was just so refresh. Like, they started out with I thought, a kind of BS holding call on Brian O'Neill. I
Yep.
didn't really see any holding there, but they start out 1st and 20. You're like, oh man, this is gonna be, we're gonna punt the ball, give it away, but we overcome it, and then later on we get a kind of a ticky tack face mask, an offensive face mask.
Yep.
How many times do you see that on offense? I mean, he did get a bit of
It,
his
it
face
was
mask.
it was a face mask. That's the thing with some of these penalties, especially the defense fans to the face too. Like I feel like I never see those penalties happen to other teams, and they always happen to us. But they're
Yeah,
penalties,
I mean,
so
there were BS calls on both sides. I thought the refs just
yep.
were had their whistle kind of close to the mouth. But anyway, the fact that we saw 3rd and 20 and we didn't punt the ball is like, who are these Vikings? What have they done with Zimmer's Vikings? So very refreshing to see them go for it twice on fourth down. And there was even a third time they were planning on going for it on fourth down if the umpire hadn't interrupted the
Yeah.
play. That was the Ken Wangwu special teams trick play kind of that got called off. So good to see some aggression and good to see it paying off.
No, I totally agree. And that third and forever, that first and second and forever, on that last drive, getting into that backed up situation twice and still converting and still getting out of it, I think that's kind of a shift. And, maybe that's just the individual plays or the execution in that specific moment. But I really hope it's a sign of what we're going to see moving forward with this team.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's not just the aggression on going forward on fourth downs and stuff, which we have seen this week especially, but in the last couple of weeks too. It's also like pushing the ball downfield. Like, there was a 3rd and 15 call where I think everybody kind of was like, okay, 3rd and 15, whatever. Here comes the give up screen. Here comes the
Hmm.
draw play. We'll just settle for 5. And instead, Jefferson runs like a 20-yard out route or something,
Yep.
and they call this, I think, 5 or 7 step drop. So really putting their offensive line to the test, saying like, hey, maybe we'll get sacked here. Maybe there'll be some, we'll risk a bad play, but if we can convert downfield, we'll get it. And Jefferson was able to like convert. Cousins was able to deliver a throw. There was a lot of that. Like when, on third and more than 10, they were on multiple occasions able to convert downfield, whether to Jefferson or to Thielen or like to forcing defense. There was another one. Jefferson forced a pass interference call, which is also getting a first down. So Kirk's average depth of target was not like super high, but it was high. So
Yep.
that
No.
was really good to see. So aggression on all levels is awesome.
No, I agree. And going back to that just a little bit more, like on first downs, I think we were running more shorter plays. I remember on that last drive, I think one of them was a rollout that we ran off of play action, and I think it went to CJ Ham, or maybe that was a little bit beforehand. But then the slant or the curl flat, like the stick route or whatever it was, or slant flat to Tyler Conklin that only got a couple yards. Like that's a little bit frustrating on first and very long. But then second down, we were really getting vertical. Where a lot of times you see, oh, we try to get something quick where we get a cheap like 8-10 yards right on first down. That seems to never work. And then we turn around and we run the ball on second down or something, where I don't think we were running the ball on first and second down. And I think that's a huge also kind of shift there. I mean, honestly, we were a lot more aggressive passing in this game than I thought we were going to be, just given the defensive profile from the Chargers too, but it ended up working out. So talking about passing a little bit, I mean, we can transition to the passing game. Obviously, a lot more aggressive, more downfield, and the key to that was Justin Jefferson in this game, right? Like he dominated. And he even had the one play where we got called for holding. He dropped the ball a little bit and it got called back. That would have been another 20-30 yard gainer. He's up there. And I mean, that was almost a really awesome catch by him too. And he made a couple of great catches on fade balls. Really just superior route running on a couple of the outs, right? The one he got the pass interference, the other he converted through pass interference, right? So really just some great stuff by him. And then that it was like a second down and 20 or whatever it was, where he literally is catching the dig on the backside. He's between three defenders and he bowls everybody over. Like he was just awesome all game.
Yeah, I mean, he was just completely dominant. Like, even the box score, 9 catches, 143 targets. Like, that doesn't do it justice. Like, and he had a carry. I mean, he probably, that one, like, jet sweep,
Oh my
they
god.
kind of shut it down. But, like, he was probably able to cut upfield if he hadn't tried to go.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny because they ran the sweep to the field, to the close side
Yeah.
rather than the field side, so he didn't have as much room to work with. But they did that jet motion a few other times, and like, man, Chargers were like keyed in on it. They were like worried about Jefferson getting the
Mm-hmm.
ball. So not just like as a weapon, but like, oh man, the out routes downfield. He had I thought a really nice dig route downfield. Like on the broadcast, he just like wound up wide open, and I was like, it turned up the all 22, and there he is, like running a beautiful dig route. So to like that little Euro step
Yeah.
top of his route move he's got, the contested catches, both of those fade routes were insane. The way he's able to like separate, box out, establish leverage, jostle with his hands just enough to get in, be the only one who's in a position to make a catch, and then just the full extension. Like he's not a tall, he's one of those receivers who's like, he's not tall, but he sure plays like he's tall. Like kind of like DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is like surprisingly 6'1". Jefferson's the same way. He's like 6'1", but like almost 34-inch arms, like huge. So you see that on those fade routes where Kirk Cousins and Jefferson is just an amazing connection there. So yeah, anytime you got 9 catches for 143 yards, like and the route map shows it too. Like man, he was winning in every
He
way
was
possible.
doing
Just
absolutely everything. Yep.
after the catch too, like there was that incredible throw where Kirk kind of needles it into a triangle, and then Jefferson, like I think it was second and 20 or something, and Jefferson catches it out 15 yards, and there's three guys who immediately go and tackle him, and he just like sticks his feet in the ground and starts backing up, and he's like, no, I'm not going down till I'm past the first down marker. So just really the releases, like kind of this was probably one of the more complete games Jefferson has had. So that was awesome to see, especially after 2 games where he probably could have gotten the ball a little bit more. So it was really encouraging to see
Yep.
that too.
Yep. Getting back to your guys, getting back to what has worked really all the whole season, because he was averaging 9-10 yards to target before the bye as well. So it makes sense. You know, and then on the flip side of the ball, right, on the defense, I think it's depleted right now, right? We're missing Hunter, obviously out for the year. We're missing Barr. We're missing Harrison Smith has missed the last 2 games. We had Patrick Peterson out. So we had a bunch of young guys really step up.
Michael
I thought,
Pierce, yeah.
yeah, Michael Pierce obviously out. I mean, Armin Watts has been playing for quite a while, so that won't even slip my mind, right? But I thought James Lynch, we've talked about him a little bit in the past weeks, but Blake Lynch also stepped up. I thought they comboed really well in the run game, which is kind
Yeah.
of funny because they both played together at Baylor. Cam Bynum had another great game. He had that sack, which was, kind of on the offensive protection, but it's still great to see. And really, he's not out of place, or he looks like he belongs on an NFL field, which is nice. And then the corners, I mean, Breland had a couple mishaps. He wasn't great in the game, but Dantzler, I thought, held his own, played pretty well too. So on the defensive side, I mean, we held a very good offense to 20 points, right? A very explosive offense, and we've limited explosive plays. I think that's probably the number one thing the Vikings defense has done this year is limited the explosive plays outside of like a couple of very notable Breland errors, right?
Yeah, other than deep defensive pass interference calls downfield.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
They
that too.
they
Oh my God, those were awful in this game. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they were wrong, but I just hate the way the rule
it's
was written,
just,
where
yeah,
if the ball is underthrown, like it's gonna get called on, like
yeah.
the quarterback screws up and you end up giving up an explosive play.
Like
Kind of, I
I
don't know.
get both of them, right? Because the first one, the ball was just underthrown, and then you give up an explosive play, and it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess he could have been more in phase or whatever, and then that doesn't happen. But when the guy's coming back to the ball, like that's really hard. And then the other one where Mackenzie Alexander, honestly, he did tackle Keenan Allen, right? But the ball was it was. I mean, it was
Yeah,
close enough where you're still throwing the flag, but it was not going to be caught, even if Keenan Allen doesn't get tackled. Like, I don't know. It's just frustrating.
yeah. If we had lost this game, we'd probably be talking a lot more about how much the penalties like hurt us
Mm,
in this game because man, like defensively, Zimmer, despite being down half his starters and his most important, like his number one cover guy, his number one pass rusher, his like premium nose tackle, his the guy who wears the green dot at linebacker, and like they set up the defense around schematically around what Anthony Barr does and what Harrison Smith does. And then Patrick Peterson and Daniil Hunter are probably like the the most your most important coverage guy, and your most important pass rusher, and then Michael Pierce. Like they're missing like probably I don't know other than Kendricks, those are five of their most important starters. I think
yeah,
missing all of them, and Tim's
yeah,
still able to like limit Herbert, who's really talented quarterback, to what 170 net yards, one touchdown, one interception. I like 20 of 37, I think. So just a really impressive defensive performance from Zimmer. I think this will go into his like echelon of like memorable Zimmer performances, and I think especially because it wasn't. There was so much more blitzing that I'm used to seeing
yes,
from Zimmer. Like
absolutely. We normally
Zimmer is
blitz.
usually
I think I saw it from a reef. We normally blitz like 25% of the time or something like that, which is about league average. And in this game, we blitzed on like 40% of dropbacks or something, which is impressive. But I guess it was game plan dependent on Herbert, right? They saw that as something
yeah.
that he struggles with.
And even when we weren't blitzing, we were like showing blitz on a lot of
Yep.
like second downs or whatever, and then we just drop out of it. But either way, Herbert was thinking, "Oh man, I got to get the ball out all game," and you saw that in his like his limited depth of target and his getting the ball out quickly and his kind of feeling. I feel like he was feeling a little bit of pressure. He had some errant throws that I think you could attribute a little bit to a collapsing pocket. I think you saw pretty good games from Wanham was going up against Storm Norton, who's former Viking. I don't want to dig him
Yeah.
too much, but he's not a starting caliber NFL
No.
tackle. But like you saw some good pass rush from the guys, and Griffin against or Slater was like an awesome matchup. Like Slater's really freaking good, but like Griffin, that was like kind of match of the Titans. So Griffin had him beat a couple, maybe three times or whatever. So yeah, we were making Herbert feel uncomfortable, and it was really awesome to see Zimmer and everybody be able to like scheme that up. But yeah, I mean the replacement guys I think have been really impressive. Watts, I think, I've been thinking him as maybe just more of like a nose tackle who's able to pass rush, but he can rotate in as like your pass rushing nose. But I saw some really good run defense from him. James Lynch is like, I tweeted out that if it weren't for KJ Osborne, we'd be talking about like the incredible, most improved guy on the team is James Lynch, because last year he was a fourth rounder who was so bad in camp we didn't even think he'd make the roster. Like,
Yep.
which is like
And he's
fourth
been
rounders.
he's been really good, right? He's defeating blocks. He's making plays, especially in the run game. He's making plays. And then he had the sack against the Panthers. I think he came free on a stunt or something on that one. But really, he's just been impactful and kind of been a little bit disruptive on the inside, which is kind of what you saw at Baylor. So maybe it was a body type thing because he was undersized coming out, where he was like 280 or something. And of course, we draft him or thinking about playing him at three technique, and now I think we're playing him on the nose really all the time, and it's kind
Yeah.
of interesting. But I guess he was able to add on the weight. He has a lot more play strength this year than I think he did last year, right? And that's something that with those conversions we've struggled with. getting guys to have that with Holmes and Mataafa, right? Those are the two that stand out. But I think we've done third time's the charm. I guess we've done a better job with him.
He's just got such great functional strength. Like he's really able to wall off guys,
Yep.
to set an edge, or to hold his gap in run defense, which sounds a lot easier than it is. But like, he's probably undersized, especially for like a one technique guy. I think he's still listed
Hmm.
around 300. Maybe he's able to put on more weight than that. I think if they wanted him to be like a pure nose, like a pure like hold his gap guy, he'd probably want to add at least 15 more pounds,
Yep.
ideally. Like like even like Shamar Stefan was 315. Michael Pierce is like listed for 340, and wouldn't be surprised if functionally he's
But
heavier than
at
that.
the
So like,
same time, we've got Dalvin Tomlinson on the field, who's also like 340. So it's not.
yeah.
It's just we flipped the roles of your traditional nose and three tech kind of.
Yeah, and the fact that he's able to like make these kinds of he had multiple run stops, and he's primarily matched up against Corey Linsley, who for my money is one of the best
Hmm.
centers in the NFL. I mean, he's been giving us trouble. He used former Packer last year, and before that, like one of the better centers in the NFL. So the fact that he was like a backup and was able to win a lot of, I think, the majority of his run defense reps against Corey Linsley was really impressive stuff to see. So that was awesome. And you mentioned Blake Lynch, who like going into this season, it was like our linebackers are Barr, Kendricks, and a whole lot of nobodies. And
Yeah.
so it was surprising to see Lynch was like setting hard edges in run defense. He was able to like make some really impressive plays, like shooting over multiple gaps and making tackles at the line of
Yeah,
scrimmage.
he was seeing it well. He was triggered fast on pretty much
But
anything.
like man, might have been like one of our I might even say our best defender. Like he just there were so many impact plays where I was like, who is that? Oh wow, that's Blake Lynch. Huh. All right. And so
Yeah,
both of
yeah,
the Lynches had like really impressive games, which is great because if you're gonna have five of your guys down, that the depth needs to step up. So it's awesome to see that they did in this game. And you mentioned Dantzler, probably worth mentioning. Like he was in Zimmer's doghouse going into this season.
yep.
There was a time when Zimmer said Troy Dye was ahead of him on the depth chart. So that's
Or you
thankfully
mean
that's
you
no
mean
longer the
Chris
case.
Boyd? I think, yeah.
Chris Boyd, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
which is
yeah.
not a
Chris
place you
Boyd.
want to be if you're Cameron Dantzler. But no, he played pretty well. I do think he is playing better than Breland right now. Breland is just he's had too many issues in coverage. I think he's a good run defender. I think he flashes sometimes in coverage, but like he just hasn't been consistent, and you need to have that consistency. Blake Lynch, it is important to note, right? He was only on the field in base personnel. Right, he was our third linebacker, so Vigil was still our nickel. So I think he wasn't worried too much about his pass responsibilities, and that kind of freed him up a little bit in the run game. Now are some where he's playing detached from the formation, right? He's playing like apex defender out kind of over a slot receiver or a tight end that's off of the out of the formation, right, and is coming in screaming in run defense, which is what you need from that position. So I thought that was pretty nice, and that's probably something he has experience with from Baylor with all the spread that they see and that sort of stuff. um
I ask you a question because I've
yeah.
been talking to this like with like Luke Braun and a few other folks. Like we've got speaking of these guys stepping in for injuries, we've got some really interesting, I think, decisions to make going forward. Like we just mentioned, Breland versus Dantzler. Now that Patrick Peterson is back, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Obviously, Harrison Smith is coming back. You're not taking him off the field, but like boy, the rookie Cam Bynum has played so well.
Yeah.
Not just like the set, but like the pass breakup in the red zone and stuff. Really impressive. He's a smart player, instinctive, making plays at the catch point, like making good tackles. So hard to keep him off the field. But I'm thinking specifically of Garrett Bradbury versus Mason Cole because we've been going back and forth on and. I think Mason Cole has probably played a little bit better than Garrett Bradbury is. I don't know how much you trust it, and it kind of depends on how much you value
Yeah.
Bradbury's like elite athleticism, fit for the wide zone stuff versus Mason Cole maybe being a little bit better in pass protection in certain ways, but also not being able to snap the ball, not being good in pass protection either. So I'm wondering where you come down on that one, having watched both of the guys and being
Yeah,
kind of
having
along
watched
with me a kind of a Bradbury stan a little bit.
Yeah, having watched both of them, I think, and this is me guessing ultimately, right? Because I don't know, and we can't know what the deal with protection calls is and that sort of thing. But I do think our protections have kind of sucked the past 2 weeks, especially against the Ravens. Like they sucked. like we were very bad at responding to the blitz looks that the Ravens do. We should have been more prepared because they are a great blitz team. And there were a couple times
That's all the
here,
Ravens do. They're like the
yeah,
most blitz heavy team in the league,
yeah,
so it's kind of inexcusable to not be ready for
and
that.
it's
So
like we literally have a free runner off the edge. We set a protection where we're using five guys to block four, and everybody's walked up on the line of scrimmage, right? It's nobody. We're using five guys to block four, and we're using two guys to block the three, and there's a free runner, and we don't have a hot response to that. So there's obviously something wrong with the protection, right? And that's partly on Kirk, who said he has the power to override that and should be able to see that and understand what's going on and make the correct decisions. Like, we're paying him $35 million a year, but at the same time, if Cole gets that right in the first place, it's not a problem. So that's been the major thing. I think there were a couple times this week where they got us on blitzes a little bit too, where our protections weren't set accurately and we weren't blocking the right guys. I don't remember. I do remember at least one sticking out.
yeah. There was one. I'm not sure if it was the protection or just like poor awareness from the
Yeah.
guards, but like there were times when there were free runners up. There was a
Mm-hmm.
linebacker blitzing, and Ezra Cleveland
Yep.
like didn't even notice it. And
Yep.
I'm inclined to blame that on Ezra Cleveland just not being aware of taking into account
Yeah,
the off-ball linebacker and
I
the
remember the one
protection.
you're
But
talking about now. I think it was a play action or something, and he is trying to help, and he's late getting off of his help I think it was helping Darisaw or something, but he's late to get to it, and that's a problem too. And I think that's on Ezra. For Cole, I just think that you do see examples, especially in this Chargers game. Well, and he's going against Linval, so it's a difficult matchup, right? But of him getting walked back. Now, it's not the disastrous, like Bradbury has some very disastrous pass pro reps where he gets beat kind of instantly. So Cole, you're not getting that, and if Bradbury keeps getting beat, if he comes back, he's not full strength or something, and he's going to get beat bad by Kenny Clark. Maybe it would be better to have Mason Cole in there, but I think I would like to see Mason Cole moved over to guard and replace Oli Udo, who's having just as many, if not more, problems than Bradbury would have. And I don't know if we're going to be willing to do that, right? We screamed about that for Brett Jones for like a very long time, right? Where we want him to play guard to fill in for our terrible guards because he's actually pretty good when he plays center, and the team was not willing to put him in that position, right? So I think that with Cole, maybe they view him as a center only. I don't know what his size is compared to what we would like out of guards. So it's an interesting question, but for me right now, I'm going back to Bradbury because I want to shore up the protection calls first and foremost. And I think he's good enough in pass protection. Like, it's not like Cole's perfect in pass protection or anything. He did struggle, and Bradbury's better in the run game. Now, I mean, it's kind of like if you could give me Mason Cole's performance and tell me the protection calls are going to be perfect, I'd probably take Mason Cole right now. But it's hard, right?
yeah, yeah, I think I agree. And it's right to bring up Oliudo because he was called for two holding calls in this game. Honestly, they could have called him like five times
Yeah.
at least. His punch is so wide. Like he's liable for a holding call every single, and it's just he's so raw, and he's got great. Can see the traits they really like in him
Yep.
and why they gave him a shot in it. I mean, he's huge and he's really strong.
And
They
the
haven't really had that.
flashes, like you're saying, the flashes are there. They have flashes happen, but in between them, it's rough.
Brings in some really plus plays, especially when he's able to like drive block and move guys. Or he's also like an incredible athlete, so he's got an enticing level of traits. And the fact that you took this extremely raw sixth rounder from Elon, and now he's finally able to like see an NFL field. It's exciting. And he was, it's funny. He was kind of living up to the hype early on. Like the first few games, he was playing at an above average level, I think, for a guard.
Mm-hmm.
But since then, I don't know if like bad habits are coming back or he's panicking. He hasn't exactly played the toughest competition in recent weeks either. And the fact that he's constantly holding, his punch just needs to be like reworked from the ground up. He doesn't know where to place his hands. He's like he doesn't set properly, and guys can get around him. He's got a lot of technical issues. So I obviously the hope is that like Wyatt Davis or somebody would be able to step in, but we saw that like when somebody got hurt, I think it was Blake Brandel who came in.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what the other options are at this point. But yeah, we always deep dive on the offensive line, but I guess we're Vikings fans, so this is just our life.
It's just the focal point of what we Blake Brandel, make him a tight end, maybe. I don't know. Because that when he was 6 offensive lineman, that mesh play for the touchdown to Tyler Conklin, just they ran that great. Like that was a fantastic example of how to run mesh by like
Oh,
our
incredible
yeah,
collision of bodies. Just
yeah,
saw both of the
yeah.
guys just like flying through the air. It was awesome. So
And neither of them made contact with either defender. Like that's the other key there, right? Because you get called for pass interference. No, you just make the guys run into each other. Like really,
I
really
like, you know,
fun stuff.
it's funny. I wonder what you think about like the play calling at the goal line because it's tough when you're a wide zone team because you don't have like the strength to sort of run
Yeah,
duo and run people over when you got like Bradbury and Ezra
it
Cleveland in
it is
there.
hard because I think just analytics. I think say that power blocking and gap blocking is better at the goal line. So that's interesting. I do think we struggle in those situations. Like the one thing that I come back to is like another thing. It's just kind of random, but whenever we have like that massive bodies there, we always seem to be on the losing side, whether it's on the defensive line or the offensive line, right? Where we let guys, jump over the line to score a touchdown like Larry Roundtree did in that game, or we get our guys beat on 4th and 1 or whatever and get stuffed, and it has to be, Cook with an incredible effort to get across the line. Um, but at the end of the day, when you're on the 1 yard line, I think you trust Dalvin Cook to get in the end zone in 3 attempts. Now, obviously, you can't run the ball every single time, right? So on that play calling, especially on the first one, that fade, I think Jefferson and Cousins just weren't on the same page, right? So
Yep.
that's kind of tough because when they're not on the and that kills it. And then we ended up 4th down. I like the aggression to go for it on 4th and 1, and obviously we got the penalty, so that was great. But you know, and then we ran later. So it's not like we never ran the ball on the goal line. We mixed it up. I think you probably want maybe a 2/3 balance of trying to run it in versus throw it in.
Yep.
And we were kind of
We did
on the
have
flip side of that. But yeah,
the game winning play was that toss, that sort of that crack toss play
yep,
on 4th and 2, which is tough because you come out in a short yardage, gotta have it, gotta have like win or go home kind of play. And they come out with a bare front, with Linval and everybody else up
yep.
front. So it's tough to run like duo or inside zone or whatever against a look like that. So I actually really did like the idea, like getting
I
it in
I
Cook's
like the
hands,
play
but
call a lot. They
trying to
blocked that
conjure
up
the outcome.
great because they got O'Neal out in
Yeah.
front, and he was able to wall off a defensive back, and then Ham walled off
Anytime
Murray
I
or
get so
somebody.
amped up anytime I see O'Neal pulling because he's like,
Yeah,
man, he's like a man on a mission when he gets out there on downfield. So that's awesome to
that's
see. So
that's the guy you want out in space on this team. That's the guy you want. Him and Bradbury. Honestly, Bradbury's great at that
yeah.
too. But yeah,
Bradbury on screen blocks is it's so funny because he's so bad at so many things, but on screen blocks he's just an elite player on screen. I don't like to throw that term around, but like man, he's so
yeah.
good on screen blocks. So
Yep. That,
um,
that used to be like I don't know if it's still an individual component of like the PFF grade, but back when they did just the like plus minus stuff, that was an individual component of the PFF grade. And I forget who it was, but I remember seeing some guy who was like ridiculously high on that and bad at everything else. And that's what Bradbury
that's
reminds me
Bradbury.
of. Um,
Oh man,
but anyway, so kind of we've been talking a lot of tape, but let's transition officially into the tape talk section.
officially
Official
talk.
tape talk. Let's go. Uh, but no, the first guy I want to bring up, and we haven't really talked about him, is Eric Kendricks. Right? He was just phenomenal. PFF gave him a bad grade. Actually, let me get into that a little bit. So PFF gave him a bad grade. When I was going through the tape yesterday, obviously I was trying to keep an eye on that, and like I more keep a mental tally of like who's making mistakes on plays, and I think that you can assign a bunch of yardage, like probably 5 or 6 catches and I don't know what he got from PFF. If you can pull it up, I don't know, but he probably got assigned a pretty significant amount of yardage, and then the touchdown to Austin Eckler. But especially in pass coverage, I don't really see much that he was doing bad. The one was a double A gap look, or maybe it was in the B gap or something, and they had Jared Cook as the number 3 to that side, and they run him out in the flat and throw it. That's technically Kendrick's responsibility. That's going to be caught 10 times out of 10. The key is for the guy to get out fast enough to be able to make the tackle. And I think he misses the tackle there, so they might have given him a missed tackle, but other guys rally and tackle him like 4 yards downfield. No big deal. good play on defense there. There was another one where they ran play action and they had the slider right to the flat, and it was Keenan Allen, and he got like 10 yards. And I don't think the Vikings checked very well after motion that was happening there. And it was like Eric Kendricks had, as the middle linebacker, has to respect the play action fake. Keenan Allen has a ton of space. That's 13 yards. I can't put that on Kendricks. Like, no linebacker, nobody, like literally nobody can make that play. Like, that's just a bad coverage call against that. There was another one where Keenan Allen beat him. Austin Eckler did beat him on the Texas route, so that's a negative. But when you're coming back and you're having the positives that he had, and then I guess finally the touchdown, right? Like, that was just a laser in between both Vigil and Kendricks. Like, they both share a little bit of the blame, but like, I mean, literally like 2 inches different, and Kendricks gets his hand on it. So I don't think there's really much people are going to complain at him about. In run defense, he got latched onto a couple times, I thought, by offensive linemen. Like, that'll happen to Kendricks sometimes because he's not the biggest guy in the world. Like, Barr, maybe you're able to stack and shed that thing, but you know, it's not gonna happen. But these are like 4, 5, 6 yard gains, and at that rate, you're like, okay, well, we need to fit this better next time. But like, at the same time, you know, you're not really mad as a defense, I think. But
Yeah.
that was kind of a long diatribe before getting to what I wanted to actually talk about with Eric Kendricks, right? Which is first the sack, which was awesome, right? So this play on the All-22, you can see Keenan Allen is going to come wide open. It's a long developing route, so it's a play off of the, you know, typical boot flood concept where Keenan Allen looks like he's running it over, and then he cuts it back the other direction. And I think Cam Dantzler is essentially in man coverage on this. Keenan Allen gets wide open. Roughly at the time, Herbert hits the top of his drop, right? So Herbert probably would need one hitch to throw. But because Kendricks triggers on this, and I'm not sure, honestly, I don't know what you think, if this was a design blitz or it's just play action and he decides to go for it because he sees the lane. But he triggers on it immediately, gets there like the acceleration is great from him, and then brings Herbert down, which isn't easy at the same time. So that sack was awesome.
Yeah, totally. It was a great scripted opening play because it was such a great tendency breaker. You know, Chargers love that Yankee concept coming off play action, and they're so good at it. And Keenan Allen runs such good routes. Reminds me of one time the Packers on like the second play of the game ran play action to Devontae Adams and did like a post corner and just totally like mixed up Harrison Smith. He was wide open down. It was kind of like that, you know. They're playing off something that they studied tape to follow, and Dantzler did a good job carrying Keenan Allen downfield until he reversed and did the opposite of what they normally do. So I'm inclined to think Kendricks maybe green dogged, or maybe he just saw the lane was like open and he just triggered downfield. And it was awesome for him to like be able to take that, because that turned a huge explosive to start the Chargers' first drive of the game into a 15-yard sack, after which they ran a give-up screen. So you go from a high potential to score on that drive to punting. So really game changer. And that was the funny thing is that probably wasn't even Kendrick's best play of the game. So great stuff there.
No, so obviously the best play of the game was his interception, which was absurd. Like I mean,
special, like
special.
of the best plays you'll see from a linebacker. There's two linebackers in the league who can probably make that. Three, maybe Wagner and Warner, maybe.
I don't think Wagner can even make that play anymore. Like Bobby Wagner used to be able to make that play.
Wagner, yeah.
Yeah. But Fred Warner can probably make that play, and I don't think anybody else can. So like literally play action again, right? He has to robot, which has been pretty popular in like the NFL terminology this year. Like I feel like people have been talking about that quite a bit, but that just means if you're a linebacker and you have to give credence to the play action fake, which sometimes you don't, because and I saw, like, you saw this against the Ravens where the Vikings were not like biting on play action. Like Kendricks did not bite on play action a couple times against the Ravens. It was kind of funny, and he was right. So obviously he knew something, right? But he gives credence to the play action fake, and then you basically just need to turn around and run back as fast as you can and find somebody crossing. He finds Keenan Allen crossing, flips his hips to run with him, stays with him, and then just makes an awesome catch. Like, it's diving out, hands extended, two hands up, rolls over to protect the ball as he's falling down. Like he caught the ball like a wide receiver. I think probably 90% of corners in the NFL, maybe not, like 75% of the corners in the NFL, that ball just gets knocked down to the ground and they're not able to catch it. Like that's a, not all the wide receivers and tight ends are catching that pass. Like that's how good that interception was.
Yeah, just an extremely special play to be able to do that, respond immediately to your run fit, respect it, be able to roll over and back and carry Keenan Allen across the field. Like
Yep.
how many people have like struggled with the AJ Browns, Keenan Allen's running those dig routes or
Yep.
posts or whatever across the field. Kendrick's able to carry him like he's a cornerback while at the same time having a responsibility in the run fit. Just a special play. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show this morning, and they were talking about like why did teams transition away from cover two, and it's because well there are only so many Brian Urlachers in the league.
Yeah.
If this were like the early 2000s, like Eric Kendricks would be that that Brian Urlacher who's able to like fit the run but also carry the middle third of the field, like just to. There are so few linebackers in NFL history who can make these kinds of plays. So
And
just
he does it when we run
special.
Tampa 2 too. He does that when we run
Yeah.
Tampa 2. He didn't. No, that was Mac Alexander actually who screwed that up. Like the Cedric Wilson
But
touchdown.
we've run Tampa 2 before where he's like carried like, Devontae Adams downfield and broken
Yep.
passes up. So it's he's just a really special player to be able to do what he does, not only that he can fit into the run, but also take things away downfield. So awesome to see.
Yep. So we talked about the Lynch guys a little bit. I think we went pretty good on both of those guys. Did you want to talk about the next one in terms of option routes and what we've got going on there on the offense?
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about the way the Vikings sort of they have this built-in. I think what is it like X Hugo they call it? It's basically a fade
Yeah.
route option where if they're running like a concept
Yeah, like
to the
like
front side.
alerts or so I think the Genoco Clinic, which we both watched, called them green apple plays or something like that, is what they like to call them. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting that we saw that a couple times this game, with those fade routes to Jefferson, where Kirk Cousins will see pre-snap that Jefferson is pressed without any safety help, and he says, "Well, screw the play concept. I'm chucking this up to Jefferson because I know he's going to come down one-on-one with it because he's in press coverage, and Jefferson's awesome at beating press, and he doesn't have safety help. So we know that like if I just toss him up one-on-one, Jefferson's probably I bet on him to come down with that 50-50 ball because with Jefferson they're not really 50-50 balls, they're 70-30 balls or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we had that option too as well, but we also had I don't know if it was a pre-snap option or whatever, but it wasn't really, I wouldn't call it an RPO, but like it was a called run play where they just throw the smoke route immediately to Adam Thielen, and he's able to pick up 19 yards after the catch as well. And I think that's
Yep.
also just like a pre-snap thing. Like it's interesting to see they've built in these sort of pre-snap looks where you press Jefferson or Thielen without safety help, we'll be able to like throw that fade route downfield and have a lot of success with it. You don't press Jefferson or Thielen, you go too high and you're playing 8 yards off, we'll throw the smoke. And then if he only makes one guy miss, which Thielen has done now multiple times this year. It's funny, you don't necessarily think of him as a yak guy, but he's really good and he's still really fast.
I
He'll
will
make one
say
guy miss
I
and then
don't
boom, he got an explosive either way.
I don't love the smokes as much to Thielen because I mean he's done it twice. He did it against the Panthers and he did it here, and we've run that thing like 10 times. I mean, at the same time, it gets us 4 or 5 yards normally, but
The thing is,
so
if it's a called run play and the guy wraps up and you settle for 4 yards on a called run play, that is a called run play, fine. And if Thielen makes his guy miss and you get an explosive out of it, that's good too. So I thought it was interesting how they had both of those like pre-snap options built into if Cousins sees, if you're pressed, you're screwed, and if you're playing way off, you're screwed. So I like the way that's set up.
no, and I think that kind of intermediary between press, like that off man or like between the press and like the 10 yards back coverage is the hardest thing for those guys to play, right? For corners to play. Now we tend to like to play that, so I think I don't know, and I'm sure it depends on the corner what they like to play, right? But like because you have to go vertical on vertical steps, like you can't catch things at the sticks, and then so you have to get running backwards, so you're kind of susceptible to short routes, but then you also have that distance where the guys get free releases on you, so it's a bit harder to defend that there from the cornerback perspective. But no, that's a really good point because I mean we've seen that a ton this year, right? We've run those vertical routes. I mean, to every single receiver on the team, basically. We ran one to CJ
KJ
Ham, right?
Osborne, CJ Ham's fade
Tyler,
route.
Tyler Conklin against Jaron Curse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we like doing that a lot, and I love that we do it. Like, that's been the most consistently aggressive part of our offense, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome to see. It's you normally don't think of fade routes as like a great target because you're one on one
Hmm.
on the outside. It's tough when you've got you're playing to the boundary. But I don't know. Cousins is so good at it, and Thielen and Jefferson are so good at those contested catches that it's awesome that they're able to build that into the offense.
Yep.
One other thing I want to mention is just we kind of touched on it earlier when talking about the Kendrick sack, but like, yeah, Zimmer uncharacteristically almost doubled his average blitz rate in this game. To say nothing of the times he was showing like an all-out blitz, like a cover one type blitz, and then would drop back out of it. And I think Zimmer did some really interesting blitz schemes. I think Zimmer is probably and again, I don't want to like get into too glowing talks, but like Zimmer is probably one of the very best guys at understanding an offense's protection calls and knowing exactly how to manipulate them. And I think you saw a lot of that. I mean, we've kind of always seen it. It's like, how does Mackenzie Alexander get 4 sacks in a year? Well, Zimmer's just really good at
Yeah.
like figuring out exactly how to scheme up these like fire zones or whatever, knowing like exactly how to part the Red Sea so that you got like an unblocked sack. So
Scare
you
the
saw a lot
defense
of
with
that this
Anthony
game.
Barr and Harrison Smith, who we haven't had. That's how Mackenzie Alexander got the sacks. But yeah, no, it was great.
It was great to see. I mean, we don't have to go into them specific, but like the way Sheldon Richardson's able to loop, I think he's done really well as a pass rusher. We haven't necessarily heard his name called, but he's able to get really close to the quarterback and set a lot of things up. I like the way they're sort of able to like do the twists and games up front. And just the way they're able to use like Cam Bynum or the safeties, Harrison Smith, obviously, and Anthony Barr are the best at it because they're very good pass rushers in their own right. Like Harrison Smith is tough. He's one. Harrison Smith is not only very good at timing it and disguising it so that teams never know if he's actually coming or not, but he's got like pretty good bend and burst for a safety as well. So he can like win to the edge. He can win with speed just around the edge as well. So that's really good. And obviously Barr, coming out, people thought he would be like a hand in the dirt pass rusher, and he still has that ridiculous athletic burst, ridiculous length. He's able to take on offensive linemen and pass protection. So if we get both of them back this week against the Packers, and maybe we can transition to Packers talk now, that would be awesome
Yeah.
because as good as the blitz packages were to shut down Justin Herbert, they're going to need to be even better to beat the Packers' substantially better offensive line and substantially better quarterbacks. So,
Yeah, yeah. So it's going to be interesting. One quick thing on the blitzes. I think Sheldon Richardson, that was a good point. We actually ran a couple plays where we had both edge rushers like Wanham and Griffin to the one side, and Sheldon Richardson was an edge rusher, and we got him on a tight end one time. That was a hilarious matchup. And then we did a lot with just more delayed blitzes where a lot of times we have guys up on the line of scrimmage, and this is guys coming from depth, and I think that helped them confuse the pass protections a little bit because Zimmer even said like they changed up the way they were protecting. We kind of had to adjust on the fly from some of the game plan stuff we had coming in, and it really worked in this game. So as you kind of alluded to there, let's jump over to the preview of the Packers now.
I want to
Obviously,
say
go ahead.
one last thing. I think Joe Lombardi is the
Uh,
offensive coordinator for the
yep.
Chargers. I'm pretty sure like Zimmer got Joe Lombardi fired from the Lions way back
Yeah,
when from the
when we
same
sacked
exact.
Stafford like 10 times or whatever. Yeah,
So this
so
World Joe Lombardi is gonna have nightmares about Mike Zimmer. Probably keep him going. So
yeah,
okay.
seriously. So yeah, let's jump into the Packers preview now. The number one headline today coming out is that Patrick Peterson and Harrison Smith are both back at practice. They're back ready to go. Couldn't come at a better time, right? Coming against the main rival in the Packers. So that's just good news. Good to get him back in the defense. We mentioned, we'd like to see Cam Bynum and Cam Dantzler stay on the field a little bit. And I think we can really work Pat Pete in kind of slowly and give the corners more rotation, right? Because rather than them playing 100% of the snaps, we can give the outside corners a breather every once in a while with Dantzler in there. Bynum, maybe, have him play some slot snaps. I know he did that a couple times, even before Harrison Smith was out against the Cowboys. I think he played a couple slot snaps there, so hopefully we can get something like that going. But obviously, the most annoying part of playing the Packers is their quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. What have you seen from him this year so far? Is he still, the MVP of the league that he was last year, or where are we at?
Yeah, it's fine. The Packers are tough because they've got so many like stud players, and the thing about the Packers right now is they're actually pretty banged up. Like Bakhtiari,
I was gonna say, is he
I think
back or not?
he might be back, and they're seeing how he is. But like Jair Alexander on IR, Zadarius Smith on IR, like probably their two most important defensive players. They lost. I think Rashawn Gary is unlikely to play. They lost. Who's the other edge rusher? The older guy, Whitney
Uh,
Merciless. They
oh,
lost him as
that's
well.
right. He's on the Packers now.
Yeah, and having a good season as well, and they lost him. So yeah, they're just like banged up all over. Aaron Jones it won't be able to go because of his knee.
Yeah.
So just like banged up all over, and yet the Kenny Clark is still there. The two safeties are so good. Devondre Campbell out of nowhere is having like an incredible breakout season at linebacker. They just shut out the Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. Granted,
Hmm.
not fully healthy Russell, but still shutting out the Seahawks, incredible.
Yeah.
Holding Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs to like 13 points the week before that. So they're playing on fire. Rodgers, I don't think I wouldn't say he's having like a bad year or anything, but he's not playing at the same level as his MVP year. And I think that's just that was bound to happen because he was kind of just like playing well outside the bounds of normal. There's some just regression to the mean I think
Right.
expected. So he's
Absolutely.
still Aaron. It's like back in 2018 when we're like, well, who's Rogers washed? Like, what's happening? And like, no, he's just he's still really good, and he's still a threat to like go off any day. So yeah, that's tough. Devontae Adams is at this point I think probably the consensus best wide receiver in football. Just very tough to cover one on one, and they're so smart about like figuring out ways and using motion to get him looks, and they know that he's their best player or their best receiver, and they scheme up their whole offense. They kind of build their whole offense around like just getting him the ball, and so they do a lot of really smart things. It's going to be tough to tackle AJ Dillon. He's not often you get like
Yeah.
true old school type fullbacks, 250-pound guys try to tackle
I mean,
that.
he's
Um,
legitimately similar size to Derrick Henry. Like he is that difficult to tackle.
And our linebackers are on the smaller side. It will be good to have Barr back, but like the Troy Dyes in the world and the
Yeah, the Nick
the
Vigils
Chaz
and Nick
Surratts
Hendricks of the
are,
world. Now,
are not going to have a good time trying to tackle him. So
yeah,
it's a tough
I
matchup.
I guess for me, right, the Packers on offense. I think MVS is back, which is going to be a struggle for the Vikings. Obviously, we see him a ton. We did a pretty good job, honestly, of defending them last year, right? And that was with the depleted roster. Now, it wasn't the depths of how terrible our roster was, at the last 5 games or whatever last year, but I would say we're better than we were early last season, even with the injuries that we've sustained so far. Just because, particularly the talent in the cornerback room that we have, right? I think it's a lot better than what we had last year. Um, so that's nice, but one of the things we do struggle with still is speed at the wide receiver position, and outside of Devontae Adams, that's what they have. Like the Packers' offensive design is kind of get the ball to Devontae Adams everywhere on the field, and then also Aaron Rodgers, you have these deep shots that you can take at any time if you want to with like 2, 4, 3 wide receivers on the field, right? And I think they haven't really been getting off many of those deep shots. I know MVS has been out. That probably hurts their vertical speed a little bit. Um, I will say I think that's playing into the Vikings' hand a little bit with the way we play defense. Obviously, I wasn't on the show last week, but one of the things that I noticed with the Ravens is we were playing super deep, and that's what allowed Lamar to get a lot of yardage underneath. That's what allowed the dump offs to get a lot of yardage underneath. So it kind of worked against us ultimately in the Ravens game. And I think Rodgers has the patience to take those too, but maybe you can force him to be impatient and take a deep shot against your conservative coverage calling on defense, and that'll work out. On the defensive side of the ball, like you touched, like their defense is playing lights out right now, which is really frustrating given some of the injuries. Is Jair Alexander going to be back, or do we know that?
I think he's still on IR. I don't know
Okay.
if he's out, how
Yeah.
long he's out, but I don't think they're expecting him to come back.
Yeah. So if
Um,
Jair Alexander's
Old
not
friend
back,
Jerry Gray has the rest of the
yeah.
cornerbacks playing really well though.
Well,
So
I think Kevin King still sucks, so that's good. Rasul Douglas has been playing pretty well. Their rookie Eric Stokes has been playing pretty well, but it's a tough matchup for them, right? With Jefferson and Thielen, I would put Jefferson up against anybody in the league, honestly, right? So I think you got to continue to throw to him no matter what. Now, in years past, the Packers' run defense, they basically didn't care about run defense, and it worked against them in some instances, like against us last year, the second game, right, where we ran all over them with Dalvin Cook. And, I mean, that game was wild because the first half was literally 4 drives because the teams just marched down the field. Um, but, on that front, I think they've cared a little bit more about run defense. I think Campbell's been a big part of that. Like, his emergence kind of reminds me, and maybe Demario Davis was different just because he was on the Jets, and like the Jets were very bad. But I know Devondre Campbell like was not that good of a player in Atlanta. Like he struggled with consistency, but he's massive. Like he's probably 6'5", 250 pounds, super long arms. Kind of in that Demario Davis mold in terms of a similar type of player, and he's just kind of been unlocked in that defense. So that'll be interesting to see that matchup with Dalvin Cook, right? If he's able to make impact plays there, that'll kind of shut us down. And hopefully, even if we're not able to get the run game established, like we continue to throw the ball and don't, run into brick walls the whole time.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about. I mean, on paper, I think the Packers just have a much more talented roster, and it makes me depressed about like the Packers. I think are favored by 3 points or something going into this game, despite the fact that it's in Minnesota. So Packers would be favored by almost a
Yeah.
touchdown on a neutral field. That still feels kind of low to me. Like I don't know. On paper, I look at their roster. I look at Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, everybody else, and how well the defense has played lately. And it seems like scary, but at the same time, like Vikings are actually like better in a lot of efficiency metrics. Like Vikings have better overall DVOA. They have a better passing DVOA. They have a better pass defense DVOA. I think they're better in EPA per play. So they're like they. I don't think the Packers are unbeatable, and especially with divisional games, it's a tough matchup, and weird things always happen. The one thing I'm really curious to see um, is kind of a new look defense with Joe Woods, I think. And Patton's defense last year was like shut down the pass. Even I don't care about run defense, and like Packers still kind of don't care about run defense. But now, whereas Patton was like very much shut down the things, the short stuff, and we'll have Kevin King give up explosives or whatever behind us. Now it's very much like we're living in a too high world. We're following that trend, and we'll give up the small stuff, but we're not going to let you give up. We're not going to give up any explosives, at least not through the air. So I'm curious to see how they attack them on offense. Whether this is a big Dalvin Cook game, the way we saw last year, or whether they'll try and get the ball to Jefferson and Thielen on the outside. Where I think the strength of Packers defense is probably up the middle, going all the way back to the third level. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be interesting. One last thing I kind of want to bring up, and this is more of a game review thing, or just kind of a state of the team thing. And I didn't put this on the list, so I'm kind of throwing this at you here. But in terms of Kirk Cousins' play against the Chargers and kind of the overall offensive play calling, I think we were obviously more aggressive, and there was a mandate to be more aggressive. From a play calling perspective, I don't know necessarily if we weren't calling aggressive plays earlier. They were just being covered up well, right, by the defense. So maybe that's partly on Kubiak not sequencing the plays correctly or whatever. And I think that's something I struggle with the Kubiak in terms of criticizing him, right? Because obviously the offense wasn't working for a number of weeks there, right? And we weren't able to continue to be aggressive and move the ball downfield. But I'm not an NFL coach, right? I don't know enough about play sequencing and that sort of stuff and those sort of adjustments to be able to say, okay, well, this what you were calling wasn't working, but you should have done this instead, right? And there are instances in the past couple of games where Kirk could have been more aggressive and thrown the ball downfield and taken shots and had that open. So, do you think that the Chargers game and hopefully what we see from the Packers game is a change in the play calling, or is it really a change in Kirk's play?
I think it's both. I think Kirk has for his entire career, this has been a valid knock of his, is that he doesn't like to throw the ball unless his guys are
Yep.
really open.
Or
And
it's those vertical fade routes because he loves throwing those. But yeah,
for whatever reason, he'll take those. But in the middle of the field, he's not throwing unless they're wide open. Which he was worse, I think, in Washington with it. Jay Gruden kind of famously like knocked Cousins is like if we played the way Kirk wants me to play, like we wouldn't score any touchdowns, but because he's so concerned about like not making mistakes or whatever. So to have your head coach knock you for that was kind of notable, and I think he has improved a little bit, but still at the same time, Kirk likes his guys open, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you look at Next Gen Stats has a stat called aggressiveness, which is not the normal aggressiveness we think of pushing the ball downfield, but is how often you target a wide receiver or your pass target is within 1 yard of a defender at the time of the catch. So and in basically tight window throws. And like Mahomes is always at the bottom of the list because like Tyreek Hill is really good at getting open
Yeah,
and Andy Reid is really good at scheming guys open. So, but like it's not a bad thing necessarily. But like Kirk Cousins too is always like towards the bottom of those lists because he likes his guys to be open. And so I think part of it is that. I think part of it is not that we're not designing like plays. I think there's probably not enough intermediate plays right now where there are plays designed to go like where the 12-yard outs or whatever that Jefferson is so good at that like Diggs was like the master at. Like I'd like to see more like intermediate dig routes. We saw a lot of that this year. It would be good to see more of that. Like the dagger stuff is really working for us.
yeah,
Would be great to see more of that stuff, especially in a team like look at what the Titans are doing with like AJ Brown. Like that stuff is just money for them. So we can do a lot of those, borrow those same stuff. But like it's not like Kubiak isn't calling shot plays. It's just a lot of the boots that we're calling, like teams have figured them out by now, and they really study it. They know
yeah,
like how they're trying to flood the zones, and
yeah.
they're able to like their linebackers are able to drop back and see it coming. So
And you've got a guy nailing Kirk on like every single one of those too. Like he doesn't have the
yeah,
time to stand there and make a decision.
yeah. So it's a little bit more of less boots, more straight play action, and more five step drops. I'm not sure if I trust this line with many 7-step drops, but there's they're calling explodes. They're calling shot plays, but everything's covered up. And a lot of the time, like this game, there were some targets for CJ Ham in the flat, but like going back to the L-22, I don't know. There were probably a couple shots Cousins could have taken, but for the most part, when Cousins was checking down underneath, I felt like, yeah, that was the right call. At the broadcast, anytime you're watching, you're like, there better not be Justin Jefferson open like on a dig route or on like a post route downfield. For the most part, I was okay with Kirk this year. So I don't know. Like a lot of things this year with the Vikings, I think the things that they're struggling with, there's plenty of blame to go around. Um, I think I think it is fixable though, and like Kubiak, like there's a lot of things Kubiak does very well, and I feel like he has all the ingredients of being like a very good play caller, but sometimes he'll just I don't know. It's he designs. I really like the play design. He has some really great instances of play sequencing, but then there are just like philosophical things where like
Yeah.
the second long runs, keeping going back to the same concepts when they're not working. The over reliance on quick game, the over reliance on wide receiver screens. So many like just run plays that aren't working, the boots that he's not moving away from, stuff like that. So
Yep.
I think philosophically he can adjust a little bit. There's potential for this and what we saw in the Chargers game to continue happening going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I want to pull out a couple things there. First on Kubiak, I kind of think what we're seeing with Kubiak is kind of growing pains, right? And I think that makes sense for somebody who's a first year offensive coordinator, but it's a problem for us because where the team is at in our life cycle, like we can't really deal with offensive coordinator growing pains because for Zimmer and Spielman and them, they need to win, right? And Kirk needs to win for those guys to keep their jobs and stay employed with the Minnesota Vikings. So that's kind of problematic, right?
Yeah.
Um, another couple of things that you pointed out, I think with Kirk, he's willing to take those fades and he's willing to take those pre-snap reads. And I think that's probably what the difference with Kirk is, right? Where you see him throw these fades, but he's being aggressive because it's something he identifies pre-snap and he knows he's going to this immediately, right? When it's post-snap, he likes to see the guys get open and he likes to see them wide open, and he's totally willing to just go through his reads 1, 2, 3 like very fast, process through them, and get to the check down who he knows is open. So I think that might be that might be the difference there for Kirk, where like it's not really contradictory that he's willing to take these fade shots or those kind of shots, but he's not willing to take the longer developing play action plays or the deep shot plays. Where he's willing to take it when it's a one-on-one and he knows he's got his guy pre-snap. The
Yeah,
final. Go ahead.
just to build off that really quickly, I think one problem I have with Kirk, I mean, he's playing phenomenally this year, so I don't want
Yeah,
to knock him too. Like, he's PFF's number one passing grade in the NFL right now. So
that's a bit
I'm not
rich.
sure that's complete. Yeah, that's a bit rich for me, but like, still, I do think this is probably his best. I think this is probably his best year, so I don't want to knock him too much. But one thing I do think he consistently struggles with is whenever he feels pressure, he immediately thinks check down.
Yep.
There are a lot of quarterbacks who, when they feel pressure, they find a way to like chuck it downfield. Kirk, when he feels pressure, his like average depth of target immediately drops to like zero.
Yep.
So you see a little bit of that. But one thing I think that I saw that I really liked in this game was Kubiak adjusted some of the hot routes. Like there was a Thielen third down pet throw
Yep.
where he basically ran the hot route was a glance route, something between a post route and a slant, just like five
Yep.
steps
Rather
downfield
than
and
just
then cut
running
up.
slants the whole time and getting tackled 5 yards in front of the line of scrimmage. Yeah. Or
Oh, so
in
there's
front
an
of
un.
the yeah, in front of the
Kirk has
sticks.
to
Yeah.
throw hot because there's an unblocked blitzer. But like now your hot route gets you 15 yards instead of like a 4 yard check down to the flat. So
Right.
that was something I like to see. I hope I just to see more of that, where like the hot routes are actually like chunk plays instead of just I'm going to turtle and give up and take 3 yards or whatever.
Yep.
So.
And the final thing I wanted to pull out from what you were talking about was the intermediate game, right? Because I think the number one thing that's killed that is our lack of ability to do any sort of bootleg play action, right? Because we just can't, like, we literally can't run it as a team because it gets nailed every single time. We maybe successfully run it once or twice a game, and other time, if we run it 5 times a game, it fails, or Kirk has to dump something off short immediately, the other times. And that was a huge, like, those long crossers over the middle, to the 10 to the 15, 20 yard range was a huge part of our offense for like 2 years now. And I think it's been an adjustment period. I like what you mentioned with the dagger too, and I think that's a kind of a replacement for that, right? Where instead of having the guy coming across the field, you're clearing out the safety and you're running the dig underneath it, and that worked great in this game against the Chargers. So I think that's a good response to a lot of the too high stuff that the league's running now.
Yeah, you could be theoretically you could see a little bit with the Packers. I mean, Packers are smart with how they play their two safeties, but like those dig routes are so money. Like when
Yep.
you got guys, and especially like with Thielen and Jefferson who are very good at it too. And like teams like the Titans and even like the Chiefs, they're so good at getting guys running open free across the middle of the field. So I feel like that would be one way to try and replicate what you were doing with the boot, but can't do it anymore because teams have just figured it out, both from a coverage perspective and from chasing down the boot guy, chasing down the quarterback, not letting them have like a clean pocket to throw those. So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's really awesome conversation there. I've been having a lot of fun so far. But why don't we flip over, do our 15 seconds of fantasy, Nick? I'm not going to intro it as much as Greg
Won't be the
does,
same without Gregg.
but it
Won't be
will
able to
not
trash
be the
talk
same
him as
without
much.
Greg. We love to trash talk him. So go ahead. Maybe you'll listen in.
Okay, 5 seconds. Here we go. I'm 10-0. I'm gonna move over like 73 Dolphins. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna run the table.
Yeah, my team is an embarrassment right now. I really need to bring it back and pull it together for this playoff run. So let's go, guys. Yeah, so that's all we have. This was Kindred Skulls. No Greg today, so we were missing some of the energy, but I think we had a good time here. You can follow the podcast at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. You can also find it on YouTube by searching for Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. My ad on Twitter is at Fries Football. Nick.
Nick Olson, NFL.
There we go. Nick Olson NFL on Twitter. And Greg, who's not here but will be back with us next week, is at You've Been Gregged. That's 2 G's. Well, 3 G's in the Greg, but it ends with 2 G's.
G.
You can also find us YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, basically wherever you get your podcasts. So, Skol, everybody.
Another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind, and we'll score.